You know, many of us here have been getting up every Easter morning all our lives and coming to church. Some of us here have been getting up every morning of our lives and coming to this church for Easter. And I realize how hard it is for people like us to understand what a monumental shift in the human experience happened when God raised Jesus from the dead. And as that word of the resurrection spread from those women who were at the tomb to the disciples and out from Jerusalem to the ends of the earth, the very meaning of life changed for billions of people. Some of you may not know this, but before I went to seminary, I was a professor of Vikings and Old Norse mythology, so I was something of a specialist in paganism. I wasn't a pagan myself, but I knew as much as anyone else did about it. And for the pagan Vikings, where my people came from, and some of your people came from, or they were ruining your people's worlds, the meaning of life was glory and fame. The point of life was to get as much stuff as possible from your neighbor in this life and then bury it with you in a big mound in the ground. Or pile it up on top of your corpse and burn it so that everyone would see how awesome you were. Or the meaning of life was to tally up an impressive list of achievements to show others what you had done and how favored by the gods you were, how much maybe you were like the gods. The point of life was to be so outstanding, so smart, so wise, so gifted as a warrior, so vicious as an enemy, so rich and powerful that everyone wanted to be your friend and ally. A person from whom you either stayed far away from or very close to. The purpose of life was to die a glorious death, taking as many of your enemies as possible with you, so that people would sing songs commemorating your valor, to take revenge at all costs for every insult, to die in battle and go to Valhalla, where each day you would feast and fight, and then get better the next day to do it again as you prepared for the end of the world when everything would be destroyed in an inferno of total destruction. This, my friends, was the pagan meaning of life. A little different for the Celts, the Romans, the Greeks, the Franks. But this is how people made their decisions about how to live. And if you can gather from what I'm saying, it was ultimately about futility. Life was about death. And then along comes this word of Christ's resurrection. And suddenly, everything's different for everyone who believes the good news. Life's no longer about death, but life is about life. It's no longer about ego, about my stuff, my fame, my prowess, my list of accomplishments, the quality of my death, but life is about being raised with Christ. About knowing the power of Christ's resurrection rather than the power of my arm. About living resurrection rather than daring death. About receiving a gift rather than earning a reward. About giving it away rather than gathering it up. And my friends, for 2,000 years, people have made their lives about this. We've all heard the stories of people who have suffered tragic, terrible loss. And yet, they find themselves not just throwing in the towel, living with no hope, no future, no desire, with their soul dark and their spirit dead. But somehow, to their own surprise, they find themselves coming back to life. Finding hope and a desire and a future. How and why? They don't know. They shouldn't have. They just know that they have been in a tomb, and somehow the stone was rolled away. They were resurrected. We've all heard stories of people who suffer staggering failure and frustration and abandonment and betrayal of one kind or another. And yet, in those stories, rather than just lying down and dying, these people find themselves getting up and thriving. Why? How? They don't know. They just know that they have tasted death and are now breathing life. I could go on all morning with these stories of death and horror and hardship and betrayal and rejection and abandonment. All the hard places of human mortality that people since the beginning of time have been trying to find a way out of, find a way away from, find a way around, find the strength to fight it off or fight through it. And if you read the Greeks or the Romans or the Norse or the Celts, they talk about fate and tragedy. But along came this word of Christ's resurrection. And the story for billions of people has changed from one of fighting death to embracing life in all its shades of light and darkness by the power and mercy of God, and coming out the other side, transformed, resurrected. Now I know this all sounds totally unbelievable. Fantasy, good news. Except all of us know it's true. Because billions of people have told their stories over 2,000 years of living the resurrection power since that day when Jesus was raised in Jerusalem. So the question is not whether it's true, but whether you want it to be true for you. Or if you just prefer to grit your teeth and fight to the death in a blazing glory with all your stuff heaped on your grave. That's your choice. I say grit your teeth because there is another huge difference between resurrection living and pagan living. And I know this from personal experience. It's not about perfection. It's about getting up the next day and trying again. And once you've found the power of the resurrection in your life, once God has plucked you out of the death of someone you loved, taken you out of an addiction, taken you out of a bad mindset, taken you out of failed relationships, you find yourself being able to greet the new day with less fear, less anxiety, if you will, loosening the grip on the sword hilt of your life. Embracing circumstances, greeting each new day, not as the Vikings would say, as a good day to die, but as a new day to see what new life God is bringing forth. So my friends, if this is your 55th Easter like it is mine, or your 78th, or your 3rd, the ball's in your court. You've heard the good news. Again, my question for you is, do you want the resurrection to be true for you this year? Amen.